Today I want to talk about traditional art, and I want to talk about why going into the future I think it's going to be more important than ever. For the digital artists out there, I do worry a bit. Also, I drew another picture inspired by Berserk, and I want to show you why I think contrast in your art will make it that much more interesting. Contrast between warm and cool colors, the contrast between the light and the dark. In my sketch, I have guts in the center, which will be the focal point. And in the background, I'll have darker tones and a secondary light coming down on his shoulder. But the main light source will be in the bottom right corner, creating a glow on his face. And as this piece progresses, I want you to pay attention to the contrast that I'm trying to create. The contrast between the colors that I use, and the duality of light and dark. Okay, so you got your sketch and you start to lay down some color. This is where sometimes people start to get a little bit nervous. After all, you took the time to make that sketch and it turned out to be something pretty cool, something you really like. And now you're messing it up with your ugly layers of color. But don't worry too much. You have to understand this is all part of a process. It's part of your plan. You've got a plan, right? After all, you're not doing digital art. You're doing art traditionally, and there's no undo button. So it's a good idea to have a general idea of where you want to go. Now, I'm not saying you have to be super strict with yourself. This is art after all, and you wouldn't want to hinder the creativity absolutely overflowing within you. But it wouldn't hurt to have something guiding you along. If I decide to go at this without thinking, before I know it, I'm making a mistake here, I'm making a mistake there, and I just have too many problems to solve at one time, and it's just not going to turn out exactly the way I'd like it to. For example, in this picture, I'm using alcohol markers, and I know that alcohol markers are a lot like watercolor paints. You have to start with your lightest shades first, and that's because with alcohol markers, it's much easier to go over a lighter shade with a darker shade than vice versa. It just comes down to understanding the tools that you're using and using them to your advantage. If you're just going to be messing around, sketching, things like this, paper isn't that important, at least to me. When it comes to something that you want to put a bit more effort into, you don't want to choose the wrong paper. Choosing paper really comes down to what you're using to make your art. I use a combination of wet and dry media. Usually it's alcohol markers and colored pencil. This is about the best paper I've found for what I like to use. It's Arches Watercolor Hot Pressed. What I like so much about this is, first of all, how thick it is. If you've ever used alcohol markers before, you know it's going to soak into the paper, as opposed to other things like colored pencil or certain kinds of paints that sit on top of the paper. If you're going to be layering a lot of different colors, it's good to have a paper that allows you to do that. Also, this paper works really well with both alcohol markers and colored pencil. I have absolutely nothing against digital art. I'm actually a big fan. And because digitally, nothing is ever really final, it gives you a lot of freedom and makes it really easy to solve problems you might run into and maximize your creativity. But what I really worry about is AI. Now, I hope that the demand for the digital artist is always there, but it's hard not to look into the future and wonder what might happen to professions like concept artists and even animators. Every day I go on the internet, every other image I see is AI generated. And because the internet is being flooded with AI art, I think traditional art will be more valued. Piece of art that you know has been made by human hands. Until they make robots that can make art, I guess, but that's a topic for another video. This piece is almost finished, and this is usually where I start putting down all the details. I'll use a lot more colored pencil and even some acrylic paints. And this is the reason why I really like using mixed media. When I use my markers with this paper, it's really easy to make something look like it's out of focus or far away, and is really helpful to create different textures, like his cape or the sort of ethereal background. And the precision of the colored pencil helps to bring everything into focus and create really nice highlights. And you can slowly start to see all of your work and all of your planning come together. I'd like to go a bit more in depth on how I use alcohol markers. And if you'd like to see that, let me know in the comments below. And if you really like this video, please consider subscribing.